The regular tracks in Mario Kart World are amazing, but they aren't the only way to play races in this game. There are 202 other tracks that go from one place in the world to another, and they've been a big talking point ever since the game came out. Whether you call them intermissions, routes, highways, or anything else, I'm sure that you will have heard a lot of negative talk about these tracks, with complaints about straight lines and boring sections being quite common amongst the player base. However, I quite enjoy a lot of these tracks online, especially since I started playing 24-player competitive lobbies. Don't get me wrong, there are some that are pretty dreadful, but in the rooms I play in, people will typically only pick intermission tracks that have cool driving strategies or interesting layouts, so I have a lot of fun whenever I play them. So today I'm going to be going through each regular track in the game and naming the best intermission route that arrives at that track. Let's get into it. To start things off, I am picking the route from Warriio Stadium to Mario Bros Circuit. This track is great because you get to play Mario Bros Circuit backwards, making it feel a lot more interesting than others that end in a regular lap of the track. You can do a few cool driving strategies on the backwards version of this track, like this shroomless shortcut at the start where you charge jump onto the wall on the right. The rail shortcut can also be done backwards. It makes for some pretty chaotic endings to races here. Now there are a few different tracks you can start from that end with backwards Mario Bros Circuit, but I chose Warriio Stadium for two reasons. One is the fact that it is shorter than its counterparts, and the other is the off-road shortcuts you can do just before you arrive to the track. They are pretty fun and definitely worth knowing about. Crown City is one of the most interesting tracks when it comes to intermissions because there are 3 different versions of the track excluding the regular one. The best of these versions is absolutely the beach one, where you go backwards through section 1 of the regular track and end up on the beach at the finish line. It is so much fun to ride on the rooftops here, and there is a very cool shortcut on the final turn where you make a big jump on top of a pyramid of Goombas. As for which track I think is the best one to start at, I have chosen Koopa Troopa Beach. When they updated all intermissions that involved Koopa Troopa Beach, this one had a couple of turns added in the water, but nothing that made the track drag on for too long. And as much as the water driving in this game isn't ideal, I actually think that it works quite well for this one. There are no blind turns, and there is always something going on in the straightaway sections, whether it be dolphins to avoid or manta rays to give you a boost. For the next one, we are going from Crown City to Whistle Stop Summit. Now, if you watch me regularly, you might be surprised that I picked this track as the best one to Whistle Stop Summit, as I've often complained about it getting picked, but to be honest, it just is quite a fun track to play. You start off with a line of dash food, already giving the track a unique feel. This dash food is important too, as it can let you take the big grass shortcuts immediately and get into the front spots. The section afterwards is the main selling point of the track though. The road continues on for a while after the item boxes, but you can actually divert onto the train tracks on the right halfway through, and this path is a lot faster than the regular route. If you do stick to the normal path though, you have a couple of mushroom shortcuts you can take, so you will probably be using a different path every time you play this track. After that, there is a very wide section with 4 different train tracks, which leads you to the bridge, which then pretty much gets you to the regular track for lap 3. There are a few tricky rail techniques around the bridge section to learn, and they are important if you want to get as far ahead as possible before you reach Whistle Stop Summit. Overall, this track is fun to drive, but I do still think it is a bit too overhyped. There are many other intermission tracks that I think are a similar or even higher quality that aren't as heavily appreciated as this one. Now, for DK Spaceport, I struggle to use any other logic than which one is the shortest, because every intermission that ends here just plays the entirety of the regular track anyway. Along with that, none of them really stand out from the rest, so I have gone with Koopa Troopa Beach to DK Spaceport because it has somewhat interesting water driving and a cool glider section, but the main reason is that it's the shortest one, and even then I think it's still too long. So yeah, this track isn't a great one for intermissions on the whole for me, but I would pick this one if I had to. Desert Hills is much more interesting, as there are routes that end with a backwards version of the track. The one I've gone for is Whistle Stop Summit to Desert Hills, because it also has a lot of off-road at the very start to cut off, along with a glider in the middle if you went on the power lines 10 seconds beforehand. As for backwards Desert Hills, it works in a fairly similar way to the regular version, with big shortcuts at the start and end of the track. Of course, there is different driving tech when going backwards, such as the shortcut over the big patch of off-road on the left immediately after the final item set. In all honesty, I wouldn't necessarily say backwards Desert Hills is better than forwards. I just prefer it when an intermission track is a bit more unique than others. You'll probably notice this throughout the video. I'm very much a fan of backwards tracks or entirely new tracks altogether being found at the end of intermissions. A perfect example of this is SKaR Bazaar, which has a secret different version when you go from either Airship Fortress or Warriio Stadium, the latter being my pick for this video. After many different off-road shortcuts and sections through the desert, you find yourself going backwards through the start section of the regular track, but then you end up going on a completely different route as you enter the final lap. This involves driving through Daisy's Palace, which is the name of the two tracks that have this layout. There are a few tight turns and even a split path, all of which can get pretty hectic online. The ending of the track is the best part, as you jump back into the Bazaar with multiple different options of paths to take, the fastest and most fun involving a sequence of rail tricks that get you to the final turn. I do wish that more tracks had secret other tracks like this built inside them for intermissions. It is really exciting to drive a completely different route the whole time. By the way, I picked the one going from Warriio Stadium here just because it isn't as long as the Airship Fortress one, but I should say that they both have the same cool off-road section just before the bridge that leads to Daisy's Palace, so it isn't just the ending of this track that I enjoy playing. Bowser's Castle to Warriio Stadium is my next pick, and once again this is a backwards track, but this time the differences in driving are really significant. The entire middle section with the ramps is quite difficult to drive optimally. You want to avoid landing in any harsh uphills whilst taking the turns, it is not easy at all. Of course, the big off-road shortcut is now at the very start of the lap, which I think is an improvement. At the end you have the two big ramps followed by a straightaway section, but like the regular track, you can use the rails to your advantage here. If you go on the right side, you can do a precise jump onto the rail to take the final turn as tight as possible, saving a lot of time in a crucial moment of the race. All of this adds up to a great track in my opinion. It is a shame we can't play this as a 3-lap track though, because the path to get here isn't great. I had to choose between the route from Bowser's Castle or from Drybone's Burnout, and once again I just went with the shorter one. This logic being used so frequently does show the lack of exciting elements on many of the paths between the tracks in this game. I think they just made the distance between the tracks too long. I mean, you do go across Big Donut in this intermission, which is sort of cool but not really exciting to drive. I very much only look forward to the final lap of this track when it's picked. SKaR Bazaar to Airship Fortress is much more interesting from start to finish. In the beginning, you get to play the first section of SKaR Bazaar, which is something that I wish more intermission tracks did, especially ones that don't feel like they go on for too long. Straight after, you go across the bridge, then you have a big off-road shortcut, leading you to Chain Chomp Desert, which, to be fair, is quite a weird area to drive through. Where this track gets really fun is after the first glider, where there is a very long left turn floating in the air, which then leads to a second glider that lands on the side of the ship. Then there is a very tight tunnel section with rails on the sides, and then finally you go up the spiral to get onto the regular route for lap 3. This entire path is class. It brings constant action rather than constant boredom. DK Pass, in my opinion, is the track with the best intermissions on average. Almost all of them are quite interesting and unique to me. Despite that, the clear favourite is Salty Speedway to DK Pass, which is one of the two routes that leads to backwards DK Pass. This track is the best backwards track in the game by a mile. If it was a 3-lap track, it could have honestly been in my top 3 favourites overall. It is so much fun. The big highlight, of course, is the charge jump shortcut onto the inside rail in the middle section. The entire sequence is a perfect difficulty for how much time it saves, and it is so satisfying to do. Like Warriio Stadium, the big off-road cut is now at the start of the lap, and the rest of the driving is fun as well. I enjoy the entire track backwards. It isn't just this part that I like here though. As soon as you leave Salty Speedway, you can do some cool driving tech to get through the off-road section on the right, getting you into the front early on. There are several more shortcuts you can do throughout the track as well, with or without mushrooms. It is good fun. Backwards tracks aren't the only thing I'm biased towards this video, because I also love many tracks that involve Ghost Valley sections. Boost Cinema to Starview Peak is the first of these tracks, so it goes straight into this video. The amount of edge tricks and pole shortcuts you can do on Ghost Valley tracks in this game is unreal. I simply can't believe they didn't make it into a normal track like they did with Mario Circuit. Either way, after the fun of Ghost Valley here, you have a few regular turns, but then you begin a climb up the ice cliffs. This section is quite fun, with several ramp tricks in a row and some wall ride techniques, along with a random knockout tour item box gate for no reason. After that, there is the indoor section that every intermission to Starview Peak has, leading you to the regular path for lap 3. Sky High Sundae has no real standout option, but I landed on Dandelion Depths to Sky High Sundae for this video. All the intermissions here are too long, but this one does have quite a lot of off-road you can cut off, alongside a couple really interesting charge jump shortcuts, especially this one through the trees towards the beginning of section 2. I also like that you are going downhill for the majority of the track. It is more fun on the whole than large flat sections with brief hills. Warriio Shipyard has several intermissions that have long and dull water sections, but the route from Sky High Sundae to Warriio Shipyard doesn't have this issue in my opinion. This track starts off with 2 great wall ride shortcuts, then you end up on Vanilla Lake. Here you can ride the wall rather than stay on the track for a tighter turn, or you can just go directly through the middle if you have mushrooms. Then there is a long turn with loads of off-road on the left, which then leads to a long straightaway in the water. This section isn't boring though. There is a massive taifu in the water that creates huge waves to trick off. I find all of this really fun to drive, but I do think the Vanilla Lake implementation could have been more significant. Maybe if you did a full lap of the track rather than half, then it would be more interesting. DK Spaceport to Koopa Troopa Beach is my next pick, and I was actually surprised by how much I enjoyed this track when looking through the options here. Firstly, I should point out that this does lead to backwards Koopa Troopa Beach, which is nice, but definitely not as exciting as other backwards tracks for me. The path leading up to it is really fun though. There are many turns to go around and ramps to go over in the water. There is a split path section too, and there are several boost rings that make the track feel fairly fast paced. I will say the first 30 seconds or so of the track are pretty inconsequential. There is a small shortcut immediately on the right, but I do think the first section should have been removed entirely. But yeah, despite that, I actually like the track. It doesn't get boring at all once you get past the first section, which is definitely a result of the update they made a couple of months ago. Crown City to Faraway Oasis is very much the definition of a straight line track, but it isn't a negative thing for me here. This is one of the 2 intermissions that go over the long bridge, and whenever I play one of these tracks I have a lot of fun. The mix of boost panels, gliders, cannon cars, bomb cars, and even just regular cars on the road make for chaotic races every time. There are also paths you can take to avoid all this chaos if you want to play it safe, but some are quite a bit slower than the regular path. The extra exciting part of this track is that there is a lorry you can get into after about a minute, letting you barge past your opponents and destroy everything in your path. It is good fun. The vehicles on the whole in this game are actually quite disappointing, hence this being the first mention of one in the video so far, but the lorries are definitely the most fun to use. After you get off the bridge, there are a couple of cool off-road cuts you can do as well before you get to the track. I was close to picking the opposite way for Crown City earlier, but landed on it being the second best one. But for Faraway Oasis, all the others are just standard long routes through big open spaces, so I decided to get the bridge intermission into the video here. Peach Beach obviously has no good intermissions. You have to play section 2 and 3 of the regular track anyway, so none of them are fun. Great Question Block Ruins to Peach Beach at least has a nice section at the start with big off-road shortcuts, and it is the shortest one, so you can get the track over with quicker. By the way, the cataquacks in this game are useless, and it just so happens that there is a huge straightaway here that only has cataquacks on it, so it may as well be empty. Back to the good intermissions now, I have gone with Cheap Cheap Falls to Salty Salty Speedway. This one is pretty unique because throughout the entire track there are 2 paths, the road on the right or the water on the left. Now, I might be mistaken, but it feels like swapping between the paths is actually necessary for the fastest lines here, which is pretty cool. There are also extra item boxes in the water if necessary, so even if the right path is faster the majority of the time, there is still reason to go on the left in races. After this section, you end up gliding into Salty Salty Speedway before the final shortcut, and there is actually a different method to this final shortcut when approaching from this way. If you land on the right side of the bridge, you can drive on the edge of the platform and charge jump between the benches and the fences to get onto the inside rail from the right side of it, which is probably my favourite method for this shortcut. Great Question Block Ruins to Dino Jungle is my next pick, mainly thanks to the huge shortcut past the T-Rex after the second item set. There isn't much else to this one, to be honest. You glide in a straight line at the start, then follow a dirt path for a bit and end up at Dino Jungle. I'm kind of back to using the logic of the shortest one being the best here. The track I wish I was saying is Koopa Troopa Beach to Dino Jungle, because when you get to the track it seems as if it is a backwards version. However, Nintendo gave up on that after only one turn, because you then end up just going the normal way again. Next, I have the track going the complete opposite way of the last one, Dino Jungle to Great Question Block Ruins. This one has the big shortcuts at the very start of the race, and they are much more fun to do in my opinion. I especially like the sequence for the first shortcut, where you charge jump onto the wall and then combine 2 mushrooms with charge jumps to reach the small tree in the off-road, which then leads to the same shortcut from the previous track but backwards, which has a conveniently placed tree stump you can bounce off to get over a lot of the grass with only 1 mushroom, making both the shortcuts possible with 3 mushrooms in total. Once again, the rest of the intermission is fairly standard since it is just the backwards version of the previous track, but at least you get to go up the big vertical glider here. It is much more thrilling than any other regular glider section. Dandelion Depths to Cheap Falls is my next choice, and it was a fairly easy pick. To start off, you play the final part of regular Dandelion Depths backwards, which leads you to the river outside the cave. Now, the rest of the route is just driving through the river, which in fairness isn't all that exciting. There are some tricks you can do on the side using rocks and stuff, but I would understand anyone not enjoying it much. However, there is a different reason why this track was an easy choice for me, and that is because it is the only one that enters Cheap Falls halfway through lap 2, rather than at the start of lap 3, and the transition from the intermission to the track is really cool. There is an absolutely huge waterfall you jump off that gets you down to the regular track below, and there is a very cool strategy you can do to set yourself up for the Tarzan shortcut here. Right before this big waterfall there is a glider ring, which you can use to land on the rail on the right. From there you trick into the tree and then land in the water as far to the right as possible. You then go off the right side of the waterfall as well, and you should land on the water below, exactly where the Tarzan shortcut starts. If you learn this, it is really powerful. You can basically guarantee a front spot going into lap 3 as long as you don't mess it up. DK Pass to Dandelion Depths was an easy choice as well. This one has some of the biggest shortcuts on any track in this entire game. At the start of section 2, there is a really long right turn that can be almost completely cut off through the off-road, and then there is another huge patch of off-road on the left straight afterwards. If you combine both of these shortcuts with the big shortcut at the end of the regular track as well, then you'll be set up really well for lap 3. This does set the track up to be one of the biggest baggers in the game thanks to how powerful speed items are for these shortcuts, but I still enjoy it whenever it gets picked. Now, I mentioned earlier that Ghost Valley was going to be a fairly common talking point in this video, but thus far I've only mentioned it once. Well, now I have to choose which track that goes to Boo Cinema is best, so the Ghost Valley section is easily going to be the selling point here. I've gone with Acorn Heights to Boo Cinema. It is the one I've played the most and it has the best Ghost Valley section in the game. The shortcut I'm showing you here is one of my favourites in the entire game. It is a good difficulty, saves quite a lot of time and is really satisfying to pull off. There is also this shortcut at the end of the Ghost Valley section that is really helpful when you have a mushroom, and it can technically be done without any mushrooms as well, but it does feel quite random, so I wouldn't advise trying it. As for the rest of the track, there actually isn't much to talk about. Going across the lily pads at the start is cool, but for a good 40 seconds or so, there isn't too much going on other than some simple big off-road shortcuts. In fact, I was very tempted to go with the intermission from Drybone's Burnout to Boo Cinema instead, as that has the exact same Ghost Valley section, but also has a couple more cool charge jump shortcuts beforehand. Like the one at the very start where you clear a ridiculous amount of off-road by tricking off a pole and the cliff wall, or the one where you charge jump into the side of a fence on the split path wooden bridge section to get from one path to another. However, I decided against it because it is quite a bit longer than Acorn Heights to Boo Cinema, and I would rather just get to the Ghost Valley section as quickly as possible. However, next up I have the intermission from Boo Cinema to Drybone's Burnout, which has the exact same Ghost Valley section, but this time you go backwards through it at the start. The shortcuts here aren't quite as amazing, but you can still do part of the gap jump if you have a mushroom before the section ends, which is still class. Plus, the general driving of the section is still great in my opinion. You then do a bit of normal driving until you reach the wooden bridge section from the other side, which has a similar charge jump shortcut of its own. This time you have to stay closer to the middle of the track, so you just charge jump directly over the small ledge to land on the road below. It is not quite as extravagant as the one going the other way, but it is still a nice thing to know. The rest is fairly standard, just some ramps to climb and quite a bit of off-road, but all the driving beforehand easily makes this the best intermission track to Drybones Burnout. Now we are on to the final backwards track in the game with the route from Peach Stadium to Moo Moo Meadows. The backwards route itself is really nice. The shortcuts you can do aren't quite as spectacular as the regular track, but it's still a lot of fun to drive. As for the intermission to get there, I actually really like how this one plays. At the start, you can get double dash food, and no matter what tier of dash food you get, it actually does help soon afterwards. There is a shroomless shortcut through the water very early on, and then an extremely similar shortcut follows it at the start of section 2. However, the exit of this second cut is not nice to do without any speed boost, so you can just use the dash food to charge jump over the off-road and avoid slowing down. There is then a fairly long straightaway that could have done with a couple of boost panels to be honest, but other than that, the track is quite nice. Next I have Peach Stadium to Choco Mountain, a track which isn't really all that great, but the options here aren't ideal on the whole. I picked this one primarily because it actually lets you play a full lap of Choco Mountain. There are a couple that just place you halfway through the track by the start of lap 3. It also has a pretty big grass shortcut very early on the right side, which is cool, but yeah, other than that there isn't really much to talk about. For a third time in a row, I'm picking a track that leaves Peach Stadium, this time being Peach Stadium to Toad's Factory. This one is actually really good in my opinion. It has some pretty interesting driving techniques and strategies throughout. First off, there is the double dash food again, which is helpful again but in a different way. You see, pretty early on in this track there is a lorry to grab on the left, but in order to get there first you will need to take a shortcut through the water on the right. It can be a bit tricky to make this shortcut without touching any off-road, so if you just use the dash food, you can gain an advantage over your opponents. The lorry is absolutely worth grabbing as well, because you can use it to take a big off-road shortcut on the next turn, increasing your lead over the pack. After that there is some fairly normal driving on the road, but then you reach a slanted section that has an amazing shortcut towards the end of it. If you charge jump at the correct angle, you can make it from the ramp all the way onto the wall on the right, getting you over the entirety of the grass. If you can combine all these strategies in the front spots, you should be able to get a decent lead over the rest of the pack as you get towards Toad's Factory, so make sure to learn them whenever you can. Airship Fortress to Bowser's Castle is my next pick, but somehow none of the intermissions to Bowser's Castle are great in my opinion. This one has a completely pointless glider at the start, and then you drive on an extremely wide road without any shortcuts for a while. Eventually there is one cool shortcut you can do where you land on the lava and quickly charge jump to get back out of it, but outside of that there is nothing much to this track, or any other intermission to Bowser's Castle for that matter. I liked this one the most mainly because the uphill section before the vertical glider didn't drag on for as long, but to be fair the tricks off the rocks can be fun to do. But yeah, other than that there isn't much I can really say about this one, it's just fine. In contrast, a really exciting intermission track is Boo Cinema to Acorn Heights, and once again Ghost Valley is involved here. This has the same section as Boo Cinema to Drybones Burnout, so that immediately makes the start of this track really fun to drive. However, as much as the mushroom shortcut here is very cool, it is nowhere near as ridiculous as the other one on this intermission soon after. This is up there for the craziest shortcut in the game. Take a look. Yeah, that is possible for some reason. You can combine a charge jump into a pole trick, into an arrow slash pole trick, into a wall ride, into a trick, into a wall ride on the outside of the log, into a detach, into another wall ride, into a trick all the way over the grass without Lakitu interfering. Basically, a whole lot of madness that saves a decent amount of time. It isn't too difficult to learn either, so I imagine it can be done fairly consistently in races. There is more off-road you can cut off straight after as well. I imagine that if you did every shortcut well on this track, you could get an insane breakaway. Afterwards, the track is fairly standard as you get to Acorn Heights, although there is a neat little trick you can do on the rail to take a tighter turn before crossing the line. Calming it down a bit now, we have Drybones Burnout to Mario Circuit, which in essence is just a long drive before one lap of Mario Circuit 2. Mario Circuit 2 is undoubtedly the best of the three in this game thanks to the pole bounce at the end of it. It is the coolest trick on any Mario Circuit variant by far, hence why it is my choice for this video. As for the actual route beforehand, this one has a very long straightaway in the middle that is a bit dull, but the very start of the track is quite fun to drive thanks to the shortcuts. The two huge off-road patches here are too big to just use 3 mushrooms through regularly, so you have to get creative to cover more ground without getting slowed down too much. The method I prefer is to charge jump onto the first grave, then ride it as far as possible, then combine a charge jump and mushroom to get over the off-road. I then like to use another mushroom and trick into the bottom of the pole, trying to land on one of the 2 blocks. Either way, I can then just use my third mushroom as soon as I next touch the off-road and charge jump to get out of it. This entire sequence is fairly simple, so it's definitely worth learning. I have used this several times to carry a star up to a top 5 spot, which is of course very helpful for Mario Circuit 2, as it has a very big off-road shortcut early on. Now, a lot of people may disagree with this next choice and I totally get it, but I can't lie, I love the rectangle version of Peach Stadium. I find it so funny that it exists and I rather enjoy races on it, especially when it is the route from Choco Mountain to Peach Stadium. This track has a huge grass shortcut at the start of section 2 that can get you a big breakaway before the rectangle part of the track. It is really powerful if you can do it properly using the poles and the ramp in the middle of the off-road. As for the rectangle, as much as it is just 2 long straightaways with a few cars on the road, I just think it somehow works. It doesn't last for too long and it lets you almost fully focus on hitting and avoiding other players. I can't really rationalise it any further, to be honest. Realistically, it is pretty bad, but I just have a soft spot for it. Now finally, I regret to inform you that I couldn't decide which intermission to Rainbow Road I should pick. I was just way too spoiled for choice, it messed with my brain and I'm just going to leave it at that. Let me know if there are any you think I missed out on in the comments down below, and be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Thanks for watching.